Hi, everybody. It is Friday, June 12th, and I'm very happy to be back for another weekly Ask Me Anything webinar. This week, we're talking about a subject that a lot of customer experience people are dealing with on a daily basis, which is their Voice of the Customer program. And we're going to talk about 3 ways that you might want to consider how to improve that moving forward. So, first of all, thank you for being here. And this is our very first official LinkedIn Live, which is kind of exciting. So, thanks for being here. And if you don't know me, well, now you do. I'm Jeannie Walters. I'm a CCXP, which is a certified customer experience professional. And I've been doing customer experience work where for more than 20 years, I've been a speaker, a trainer, a consultant. I do a lot of writing around the subject. And I'm helping everyone from small businesses to Fortune 500 businesses really understand how to create better loyalty, better retention. Employee engagement is a huge part of this, and ultimately deliver on our mission, which is to create fewer ruined days for customers. That sounds so simple, but it's actually pretty complex. And if we can create better days for people, I think that's a good place to be. So thank you for your dedication to your customers as well. And so much of the work I do right now, as we're all experiencing, is that we are working remotely. So we're doing these virtual presentations, we're interacting virtually with one another. And that does require adjustments from what we can do on site in a room together. But having done remote work for more than a decade, I always love being able to connect with audiences, individuals all over the world as we're in our own offices. Most of us are probably still at home. And so I'd really love to hear from you where you're joining us from. I know we've had a lot of people join us on these webinars from literally all over the globe, and it's really exciting to think that we can connect this way on an ongoing basis when maybe we're a little bit isolated in real life. So thank you again for being there. And as a reminder, we do these every Friday on LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live. And for more information and weekly reminders, you can visit bit.ly, bit.ly/CX Weekly for Customer Experience Weekly. So this is an Ask Me Anything webinar. So what this means is after I talk about Voice of the Customer for just a few minutes, we'll be opening this up for your questions. And you can ask about Voice of the Customer. You can ask me about really whatever you want. And when that time is there to open up for your questions, we have David, who is my chief important guy around here.
Hi, everybody. That's my official title.
That's right. And so David will be helping us facilitate those questions.
That's right.
Thanks for being here, David.
Yay.
So I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can. And anybody watching a replay of this, I encourage you to go ahead and ask your questions because I will do what I can to read and respond to them. So, all right, enough housekeeping. Let's get started and talk about the 3 ways to improve your Voice of the Customer program. Now, as we get into this, I want to give a little bit of a definition to what we're talking about because Voice of the Customer, as we are defining it, a lot of people think of that as the program that their organization has where it's really about collecting customer feedback in an organized way where you get metrics. You might be tracking net promoter score, you might be tracking customer effort score or customer satisfaction rates. You might be tracking retention rates on your Voice of the Customer program as well. And a lot of times what happens is we get kind of zeroed in on these metrics and these measurements because they give us what feels like very objective information that then we can track and improve upon. But as we've developed more sophistication about collecting this data in that metric-driven, data-driven way, sometimes we get a little further away from what we're really trying to do. It's called Voice of the Customer because we want to hear from customers. We want to gather their feedback and make improvements to the customer experience based on what they tell us. And so I want to share with you something that happened with a client. He was very proud of their Voice of the Customer program. And in fact, he said, this is so great because now we're sharing our dashboard all over the organization. And they had just built new headquarters. They were very proud of the location that they had built. And as we walked in, he said, "You're going to see voice of the customer everywhere." And so when we first walked in, I saw that behind the receptionist desk, right when you walked into the lobby, there was a monitor and it was kind of flipping through a few things. There were some inspirational quotes, there was some, information about the company, and then you would see this dashboard, this very colorful, lots of graphs and everything else, and it said voice of the customer. And so he said, "Isn't this exciting? This is our dashboard." And aside from the title, voice of the customer, I started looking at it and I was trying to really figure out, what can I grasp from this? So I asked him, because I didn't see customer really on it, even the word, other than that title. And when we looked at those graphs, I said, it looks like NPS, Net Promoter Score, is going up. What does that mean? And he said, "Oh, yeah, it has been kind of going up." That's a good question. And then I looked at some other things and said, "Okay, it looks like that trend line is going down. What are you guys doing about that?" And he said, "Oh, that's a good question too." And I think it just highlights that sometimes we are very proud of putting out that we are measuring customer feedback through a voice of the customer program, but we're not necessarily responding to it in the way that's intended. Tracking the information is never enough. We need to take steps to really make sure that we're not only hearing the voice of the customer, but we're responding to it. Because while the data is collected, the true voice in the voice of the customer is not always heard. And so sometimes we put so much effort into this. We have tons of data to get through, but then we're just reporting on those numbers as if they're disconnected from the humans that we're serving. Because if we are really talking about the voice of the customer, we have to remember this is a human experience. So numbers tell us a great deal of information. It's really important to measure those things. But here are some ideas about how to move forward. So we talked a little bit about what the voice of the customer program is, but it's really about gathering feedback in a consistent, ongoing basis from customers. And the best VoC programs, they do this in so much more than a dashboard. So if you are looking at your dashboard right now thinking, "Yeah, that's what we do. We just have a dashboard." This is, hopefully something that you can bring back to your teams and say, let's turn up the volume. Let's make sure we're really listening to customers. So I see 3 key ingredients in a meaningful voice of the customer program. So that includes things like context, storytelling, and a closed loop process. So let's talk about context first. When you see that change in metrics, just like I talked about in that story, it's really important to take a step back and ask yourself, first of all, is this worth investigating further? Now, the name of my company is Experience Investigators because I really believe that in order to deliver a great customer experience, you have to constantly be turning over those rocks, looking underneath, making sure that you're not losing sight of the things that could be a big problem later. Voice of the customer programs, the metrics are there so that you can start identifying issues that might blow up later. You can start identifying, okay, this is going really well. What is happening that is improving our NPS, for example, and then bring that throughout your organization as a best practice. Because sometimes we still get siloed, don't we? We still organize things by our org chart, our internal organizational chart, instead of really the customer journey. So if you're looking for how to use this data, the number one thing is to look for the context. What does this mean? And how can we respond to it in the best way possible on behalf of our customers? And the other thing that we, again, sometimes lose sight of is that our customers have stories to tell, sometimes that they don't fit directly into metrics. Sometimes they'll say, "Yeah, I'm satisfied," but they actually have a lot more to say if we give them the space to say it. And when we are looking at data, it's easy to tell ourselves stories about what that data means, but data doesn't move the soul. We can't come to our executive team and say, here's a bunch of graphs, here's what we're going to do about it, and have them really internalize and think about the customers that we're serving. Customer stories do this. It's a great way to really connect with the humanity of it, to make sure that we're not losing sight of the people that we are serving, and make the story meaningful so that when they look at the data, they're thinking about that customer. They're thinking about the customer who had the guts to complain and say, "You know what? I used to love you guys. I've always given you high marks on your customer satisfaction surveys, but lately you've been disappointing me, and here's why. This is what happens when we connect on this human level. We start internalizing those stories instead of just looking at the data, instead of just looking at the measurements. And so if we don't have our customers' real voice in their words, then we're missing part of the equation. So there are a couple ways to do this. One is take those verbatim straight from your surveys, put those on your dashboards. Find some really good ones that represent either the best or the worst in what you're delivering to get people to really understand that this is not just a number, this is a person. That's a great way to do it. You can also take advantage of video. You can, ask your customers to send in some selfie videos and say, what was this experience like for you? Seeing somebody and really understanding who they are and the emotion that comes with it, that can go so far to tell their story. And then the audio recordings that you have from your contact center, that's another way to do it. Ask your contact center agents, what's the greatest customer story you heard, either good or bad? Let them tell you in customer words as well. But make sure that you have that part of it kind of woven into how you report out, how you share these metrics, how you really represent the voice of the customer in your organization. And then finally, we have to close the loop. And this is something that we've talked about in customer experience for decades. And it's always more challenging than I think people think. Because when we are looking at how do we close the loop with our customers, what we're really saying is that, you know what, you customer were kind enough to give us feedback. You cared enough about this relationship that you provided information for us. The least we can do is actually say to them, that is meaningful, and here's what we're doing about it, or here's what we've done with it. I don't know about you guys, but anytime I've provided feedback to through a survey or customer feedback where I maybe even request a feature, for instance, on software, it is a rare day that I get an actual response where they say, we heard you and this is what we're doing about it. It's so rare that I can remember exactly one time when I provided a little bit of feedback about a software feature we were looking for. And they came back to us and said, oh, sorry, we don't have that, but we're working on it. Standard response, right? I thought, okay, we'll never hear from them again. They actually proactively reached out to us and said, hey, guess what? That feature you requested is available now, and we want you to be part of the beta. How meaningful was that for that customer relationship? I thought, oh my gosh, they're actually listening and then they're doing something about it. And they have systems in place so that they know, okay, anybody who requested this feature, we're going to reach out to them when it's time to test and help them be part of the experience. It can be a really, really powerful way to actually improve loyalty, to help engage your customers and build that trust, which is so, so important. And then we also have to close the loop inside our organization. We have to make sure that everybody in our organization understands that we do act on this feedback. So when we're sending out those dashboards, why not also tell these stories? Say, we heard from 60% of our customers that they wanted this. This is what we're doing about it. And then we're sending out a special message to those people who did request it. I think everybody in your organization would feel really good about that, because sometimes we act like the product development team and all these, distribution, all these teams are not really part of the customer experience, and they're a huge part of it. So help them feel engaged by not just sharing that dashboard, but by going one step further and explaining how that loop was closed. And this is what I mean when I talk about customer trust. This is from a Microsoft study a few years ago, and everybody agrees basically, which almost never happens, but huge number of people say, absolutely, organizations should give me as the customer an opportunity to provide feedback. But then you look at how did they answer, do you believe most brands take action on feedback provided by their customers? Not even a 50-50 split, because they are really looking at um, how they've been treated. We have all been conditioned as customers to believe that we're not going to hear back from these people who are asking for our feedback. They're not going to do anything with it. How many times do I have to tell you the same thing? All these things that we've been kind of trained as customers about. So when you think about closing the loop, think about it as an act of trust with your customers, because that's how important it is. It is really showing your customers that you're showing up for them, not just really trying to get information from them. So, are you ready to build your what we call our daring dashboard? So, go ahead and share that dashboard throughout your organization and invite participation. Ask people, why do you think this is? Have you heard this from customers? Really engage people to be part of that conversation and provide that context so they understand those numbers. Tell the real story by showing a representative photo and a quote from a customer. That can be very powerful. You can also provide those videos, audio recordings, simple verbatim text from surveys, all of those different ways. Share that customer experience in real human ways. And then recognize those employees who get shout outs. So, this is something where I think, again, we fall down when it comes to closing the loop. So, if you are getting feedback, many customer situations, the most positive feedback that we get actually names employees by name. Somebody will be so moved by what an employee did that they will respond and say, you know what? Eleanor really went above and beyond for me, and I really thank her for that as a customer. So if you see those things, that's something not only to share with that employee, of course, but also share far and wide and say, hey, we heard that Eleanor was recognized 10 times by our customers this month for going above and beyond. And we just want to thank her. Really celebrate the employees who are getting this right, because then you can also learn the best practices. What are they doing that customers respond to that maybe you want to train your other employees about? So there are all these different ways to kind of keep this wheel going and to keep the cycle going and really not just gather the numbers, not just gather the metrics, but really use your voice of the customer to build both inside and outside your organization. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, make sure to subscribe. We do these webinars every Friday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn Live and right here on YouTube. And if you've got a question, don't be shy. Ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. You're here for your customers. I'm here for you.